Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into a story that has been shaking headlines and sparking discussions across the world. Reports are spreading that Russia and Iran have carried out a joint strike on what is claimed to be a Mossad headquarters inside Israel. If this is confirmed, it could mark one of the most dangerous turning points in the Middle East in recent years. The region has already been boiling with tension, but this development could ignite a much larger conflict with unpredictable consequences. The situation is complex and fast-moving. On one side you have Israel, a country that has long relied on its intelligence service Mossad to play a central role in countering its adversaries. On the other side you have Iran, a regional power deeply opposed to Israel's policies, and Russia, a global power locked in its own conflicts, but increasingly willing to challenge Western allies and interests. The strike, if accurately reported, represents not just an attack on Israel's security apparatus, but also a statement to the world that alliances in the Middle East are shifting in dramatic ways. For years, Israel's Mossad has operated as one of the most feared and respected intelligence agencies in the world. Known for precision operations, covert missions, and deep infiltration capabilities, Mossad has been central to Israel's defense strategy. Striking at a Mossad facility is not just about damaging buildings or killing personnel, it's about striking at the heart of Israel's intelligence strength. For Russia and Iran to target such an institution sends a message far beyond the borders of Israel. The alleged attack comes at a time when the Middle East is already fractured by wars, proxy conflicts, and competing alliances. Iran has been expanding its influence across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen through its network of allies and proxies. Israel has been striking back with regular air raids in Syria and covert missions across the region. Russia, meanwhile, has been deeply involved in the Syrian war, where it has fought to preserve the Assad regime. These overlapping interests have created a web of confrontation that is becoming harder to control. What makes this strike different is the potential for escalation. Israel has previously absorbed attacks from militant groups and responded with force, but a direct strike tied to both Iran and Russia brings in state actors with global reach. Russia is not a small regional power. It is a nuclear-armed nation already facing off against NATO over Ukraine. Iran is under heavy sanctions and often portrayed by Israel as an existential threat. If these two countries have now coordinated an open strike against Israel's intelligence, then we may be looking at the opening shots of a much larger conflict. Israel's response will be closely watched. Historically, Israel has reacted forcefully to attacks on its sovereignty or security infrastructure. We can recall its military campaigns in Gaza, its preemptive strikes on nuclear facilities in Iraq and Syria, and its ongoing operations against Iranian proxies. If Israel confirms that Mossad was struck by Iran and Russia, it will face pressure domestically and internationally to retaliate. The question is, how far will Israel be willing to go, and will the United States stand firmly by its side? The United States has long been Israel's closest ally, providing military aid, diplomatic backing, and advanced weapons systems. Washington cannot ignore a direct strike on Mossad by powers like Iran and Russia. But America is also wary of getting drawn into another major Middle Eastern war, especially while it is already stretched in supporting Ukraine against Russia. The Biden administration faces a strategic dilemma: how to support Israel without triggering an uncontrollable escalation that could draw in NATO, Russia, Iran, and other regional players. On the other hand, Russia and Iran both benefit in certain ways from challenging Israel and its Western allies. For Iran, it is about positioning itself as the leading voice of resistance in the Islamic world, boosting its influence among Arab and Muslim populations who resent Israel. For Russia, it is about distracting the West, showing that Moscow still has power to destabilize global security, and forcing Washington to divide its attention between Ukraine and the Middle East. Both countries see Israel as tightly linked with U.S. strategy, So striking Mossad is like striking an arm of American influence. What complicates this further is the shadow war that has already been playing out for years. Israel has been accused of assassinating Iranian nuclear scientists, sabotaging facilities, and conducting cyber attacks. Iran has retaliated with attacks on Israeli interests abroad and support for groups like Hezbollah. Russia, meanwhile, has quietly tolerated Israeli strikes in Syria, but has recently grown frustrated with Israel's alignment toward Ukraine. This new strike could be Russia's way of drawing a red line, signaling that the era of quiet toleration is over. The broader Middle East is watching carefully. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt have their own calculations. Some of them have grown closer to Israel in recent years through agreements like the Abraham Accords. Others remain hostile or cautious. A direct war between Israel, Iran, and potentially Russia would force these states to choose sides in ways that could shatter existing alliances and reshape the regional order. This is why some analysts are already calling it the possible start of a new Middle East war. The timing is also important. Iran has been making progress in its nuclear program, raising alarm in Israel and the West. Russia is locked in conflict with NATO over Ukraine, needing every opportunity to expand pressure on its opponents. Israel has been under political strain domestically, with divisions inside its government and society. All these elements create a combustible mix where one strike could lead to a spiral of retaliation and counter-retaliation. When we talk about the possibility of a new Middle East war, it is not just about Israel, Iran, and Russia. We have to consider Lebanon, where Hezbollah is heavily armed and closely tied to Tehran. We have to consider Syria, where Russian and Iranian forces already operate, and where Israel frequently carries out strikes. We have to consider Iraq, where Iranian-backed militias are active, and we cannot forget Gaza, where Hamas remains in conflict with Israel. Any one of these fronts could ignite if Israel retaliates. The global powers outside the region also matter. The United States and Europe would likely back Israel. Russia would double down on supporting Iran and Syria. China, which has been quietly building ties with Iran and brokering peace talks in the region, might see an opportunity to expand its influence. The risk is that what starts as a targeted strike escalates into a regional war, and from there potentially into a confrontation between great powers. History shows us how fast wars can spread in the Middle East. The Six-Day War in 1967, the Yom Kippur War in 1973, the invasions of Lebanon, the U.S. invasion of Iraq, the war in Syria. Each started under circumstances that seemed limited but quickly expanded. If Israel strikes back at Iran directly, Tehran could unleash Hezbollah. If Israel targets Russian assets, Moscow could retaliate with advanced weapons deliveries or cyber warfare. Each move could trigger another until the whole region is engulfed. Right now, information is still developing. We must be cautious with early reports, since in times of conflict, propaganda and misinformation spread quickly. But even the idea that Russia and Iran jointly struck Mossad raises profound questions. Is this a one-time operation meant to send a warning? Or is it the opening of a new chapter where Israel is openly confronted by two major adversaries at once? The answer will shape not just Israel's security, but the balance of power across the Middle East. Some analysts suggest that Russia may not want a full war with Israel, but rather a symbolic demonstration to show the West that Moscow can open new fronts of instability. Iran, however, might be more serious about escalating, since it views Israel as a mortal enemy. The tension between these two partners could determine how far the conflict goes. If Russia prefers limited confrontation, but Iran pushes for more, Israel's reaction will decide whether restraint holds or the region slides into chaos. Israel's military capability is formidable. It has one of the most advanced air forces in the world, cutting-edge missile defense systems like Iron Dome and David's Sling, and a history of successful preemptive strikes. But facing both Iran and Russia is a very different challenge. Iran brings vast missile arsenals and proxy forces. Russia brings advanced air defenses, cyber capabilities, and political weight. The combination could stretch Israel's defenses like never before. In the coming days, we should expect heated debates at the United Nations, urgent calls from world leaders, and emergency meetings in capitals across the globe. Everyone knows the stakes. A full-scale war in the Middle East would devastate the region, disrupt oil markets, trigger refugee crises, and potentially drag global powers into direct confrontation. That is why every move now will be carefully watched, every speech analyzed, every strike calculated. For ordinary people across the region, the fear is very real. Citizens in Israel worry about missiles and infiltration. People in Lebanon and Gaza fear another round of devastating bombardment. Syrians already exhausted by years of war dread more foreign intervention. Iranians struggling under sanctions wonder if conflict will bring even harsher suffering. And Russians, already burdened by the war in Ukraine, may face the cost of expanding confrontation. War never spares the innocent. At the same time, some voices are calling for restraint. Diplomats warn that escalation could spiral out of control faster than leaders expect. Religious leaders urge peace. Economists warn about the global shockwaves of another Middle Eastern war. But the cycle of retaliation is difficult to break once it begins. Each side feels it cannot appear weak. Each side feels history is at stake. This makes compromise harder and escalation more likely. So where does this leave us? We are standing at the edge of uncertainty. The alleged joint strike on Mossad by Russia and Iran is either a one-time shock intended to shift the balance of deterrence, or it is the opening of a conflict that could reshape the Middle East for decades. Israel's decision in the next days will determine the path forward. Retaliation could unleash war. Restraint could buy time for diplomacy, but at the cost of appearing vulnerable. As we continue to watch events unfold, one thing is clear. The Middle East has entered a new phase of instability. Old alliances are being tested, new alignments are forming, and the risks of war are higher than they have been in years. The story is far from over, and the world will be watching every step, every strike, every word.